Righty. It's another episode of the Changing Stage Show. My name is Florentino Buenaventura, and like always, great day, Southern California. Yes, I'm rubbing it in, guys. We just wanted to let you know that we're going to give a shout out to Concerts Cafe. They're one of our sponsors. They do all those cool concerts. They're part of our company as well. So go out and enjoy the concerts. There's a number of them that are free. There are some paid concerts as well on Concerts Cafe. And then make sure you get your cup of artist coffee, because we do branded coffees for these artists. Myron McKinley and the Myron McKinley Trio. We've got Larry Braggs just came on board. He was the lead vocalist for Tower of Power and for the Temptations. And we've got new artists coming on board. Shout out to Ellis Hall, Paris Escovedo. They all have coffee on Concerts Cafe. So make sure you get your brew. Now, today's a little different because we're not going to have an artist. We're not going to have well, I guess he is an artist now. I just found out. I didn't realize it. But predominantly, I've known him as a music industry executive, record label manager, director, now owner. I would like to bring on Greg Boraman and Soul Bank Media. Oh, I'm sorry, Soul Bank Music. I was going to say records. I was going to say records. We don't say that anymore.
It's not records. It's not media. Although actually, I like media. That might have actually worked. Now I'm going to have to change the name of the company. So, well, thank you. I feel very honoured, especially to come back. I mean, when you reminded me previously that it was 7 years since that time I was on here before, that took me a few moments to get used to that idea.
I know,
but
right?
yeah, fantastic to be back. Lots changed, but you're all looking fine over there.
Thank you. So are you, man. Still got that youthful look. Of course, last time we didn't really look at each other. That was back in our online radio days. This is before podcasting. So it's been a few, and now we have obviously moved into broadcast media, and it's a good one. So glad to have you on board here, Greg. You know, back then you were with Freestyle Records. You guys, were one of the companies that coined the term acid jazz and brought some really cool artists. We had Brian Auger, who has been an amazing artist since the 60s. Gave Jimi Hendrix his first stage in the UK, and you were really doing a lot with him. Tell us about this new venture, Soul Bank Music. Obviously, you caught me at the word soul, because that's my personal musical passion. Oh, I love all music, but tell us about this new venture, what you're doing with this.
Well, it's a new label I've actually set up in partnership. Well, more than in partnership, I'm one of the now 6 in-house record labels of the K7 Music Group. K7, a company based in Berlin, in Germany, but other in-house labels they've got is like Strut Records, run by my friend Quentin Scott, and it was actually Quentin Scott who kind of introduced me to K7 about 3 years ago to talk to them. And essentially, it's a similar setup to what I was doing with Freestyle, but being inside K7, which is a kind of multi-facing company that does label services for hundreds of labels, big ones. It's across distribution and all kinds of. Well, it has a management company as well, and does sync and publishing. So it's a company that kind of looks 360, as you kind of have to these days. Yeah. And after discussing it with the two top guys at K7, they made me the kind offer to essentially be the home for this in-house label. So that's quite an honor, because other people just work with them as partners, but I'm actually inside the group Soul Bank Music, let's say, alongside Strut Records and some dance labels like 7K and Ouse and DJ Kicks, who've been going for years, and like I say, their management company, they manage Tricky. So K7 gave me the infrastructure and the whole scope to, well, it's essentially, the first few artists I brought from Freestyle Records. When they heard I was leaving, they wanted to follow me and came with new projects. So obviously that's why I'm working with Brian Auger again. But the issue with Brian this time is that we now have the whole infrastructure and essentially the clout needed to do a full catalogue reissue program. I've done, we've struck a deal for a pretty long, decent amount of years for not just the nearly everything that Brian ever kind of released originally on different labels he was signed to, but I mean, absolutely stacks of unheard stuff, live concerts.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Radio sessions.
Are you going?
We're going big on it.
Are you going all the way back to like the beginning when he first started? I can't remember the name of the project before Trinity, but it was the one when he was with.
Before the Trinity, he was. Now we've even got recordings from the very, very early '60s of him as a. He was quite a name on the London jazz long before he touched the hammer. He was, one of the in-house pianists at Ronnie Scott's. The old Ronnie Scott's.
Yeah.
And we've got recordings of his original piano trio from 1961, 62. There's quite a lot of stuff like that. A couple of radio sessions where he was supporting the great Tubby Hayes over here. Then there's recordings by this band called the Steam Packet that not a lot of people, well, some people know about, some people don't. But this was a band formed by British blues singer Long John Baldry.
Okay.
Around Brian Auger's first organ group, the Brian Auger Trinity, but also had lots of guests. It was Long John Baldry, Julie Driscoll was in that, who later went on to be in the Trinity with Brian. Yeah. But the other guest vocalist was a very young Rod Stewart.
Yes, I remember there was a Rod Stewart project. I could not remember the name. But
there's that. And then we've got all the Trinity stuff, the albums, from the late 60s, Brian Auger, Julie Driscoll, Trinity, all that. I'm in the process of getting this all remastered and reissued in vinyl box sets, CD box sets, digital packages. It's a great deal of work. And given the long timelines on vinyl manufacturing at the moment, you have to think 6, 12, 18 months in advance because with vinyl manufacturing at the moment, it's take a ticket and wait your seat. And it takes so long to get them done.
We were doing some stuff in vinyl, and we were going to do a show where it's called Vinyl Blend, and do direct to disc recording and video that, get people to give them the chance to see it in action. And then the big plant up in Northern California burnt down, and we couldn't get lacquers to do it very easily, and we were super expensive, so we had to put that on hold. Hopefully, and then of course now with crazy COVID shipping, I guess it makes it that much more difficult to get those things pressed and shipped out.
Yeah, and there's even been raw materials issues on all physical manufacturing, down to card and vinyl and other plastic and all that kind of thing. But new capacity does keep coming on. In fact, a guy I know, I used to be neighbours with, has actually just recently in the UK just launched a new pressing plant. He's invested a lot of money, in a new plant that's going to be staffed by just a few people. But I did contact him and say, "What do you think your capacity is going to be units in a year?" And he goes, "I'm hoping for 400,000." And I said, "That's quite ambitious because you're not a plant, you're not." But there is capacity coming on here and there, very rarely, but it's not solving the problem. You have to think so far in advance, trying to schedule your releases about what's coming first. Do you do it all together on the same release day, or digital CD, vinyl later when it comes? I've just this week I've just released on there's a UK radio presenter, TV actor guy called Craig Charles, and over the years I've done 9 kind of funk and soul compilations with him. The most recent one, Craig Charles, Trunk of Funk Volume 2, just got in over here in the UK. The official UK vinyl LP charts, but the CD and the digital came out November the 5th last year. That was the closest in terms of production I could get those two physical 5 months apart. That was the closest, just because that's how I'm now having to think. Running a label's like, well, if I'm going to do this project, everything for the vinyl's got to be done well in advance, and then plan around it, hopefully, so that it all kind of ties up later. It's really, it's more complicated than it used to be.
It definitely seems like it. it was hard. You know, you had to break through gatekeepers. You know, had to get through that. But it was pretty obvious how you ran the music business back in the day. Even going back to when we interviewed in 2015, physical product was still being sold. Now we don't see that anymore. Yeah, I'm going to be very blunt. What is the record business now? What do you do as a record label to generate revenue? I mean, obviously, physical vinyl does have those. You know, you have attractionable sales there, but when you're not, you know, you people on Spotify, on, you know, all the different other services, iTunes. What is the description of a label? I guess nowadays it's definitely different before.
Well, I guess the approach, I mean, I've only ever worked in that kind of independent label sector. The only time I've kind of touched base with major labels, it's just been a nightmare. So I've always avoided them. But so I see it specifically from that point of view. But essentially, small label or big, you've got to really be in everything and on everything, because income streams have all reduced, but the number of them has increased. So essentially, you've got to make sure, you know, to the best of your abilities, the label, as long as you're not putting it in places that are, you know, really not good for your artist or your label, just you have to be on everything, you know. And the Spotify streaming argument will roll on. Over here in the UK, there's actually been some, you know, government, you know, they've discussed in the Houses of Parliament over here the whole streaming model and trying to get, you know, and I think it's happened in a few countries, because it definitely could be improved. Even if you're a skeptic, the two formats I use most in my life is streaming and vinyl, funnily enough, because I DJ, and people like, you know, these days, you know, I've just been at it. I've just started doing, guys at Ronnie Scott's club were kind enough to add me to the roster of, they're actually having DJs, not in the bar upstairs, although they're still doing that, but they now at the weekends have decks on the side of the stage in Ronnie Scott's, so that rather than just having a playlist playing, they've got a rota of people going there, and that feels like a little bit of an honor. And it's just that shows from, it was Mike Vitti who got me in there, and he said you're probably going to play a lot of vinyl, aren't you? Because the DJs can use whatever format they want there. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm glad. He said, I use it. He goes, but it's also, he goes, as part, you know, it's the theatre of DJing with vinyl. Especially when you're in a club like Ronnie Scott's, there's some guy, you know, rifling through his records in the corner, and that's better than that. Just adds a little something, theatrics almost. So yeah, that was nice. I got another one coming up the end of April. So yeah, DJing in the club next to the stage, quite strange experience, because it's a straight ahead jazz club otherwise.
You make me want to take a trip there, man, and to go hang out. And I feel like you guys are you know, developing and cultivating, you know, the musical spirit and the you know, the artistry a bit more than we are over here. You know, we got a lot of most of the younger artists that I've been dealing with, it's very much social media. They're not engaging together as physical beings.
Yeah, yes. I mean, that is just all part of the strange times we live in. But you know, my little label, you know, we do everything we can on social media. We do it on that level, you know. Across all my projects, my personal stuff and other side projects and the label, I'm admin on 7 or 8 Facebook pages, 3 Twitter accounts, 3 Instagram accounts, and I have to kind of keep some content, you know, you have to keep content churning over. And that's a bit of when you get into a bit of a loop in your head on that one, it's not my favorite kind of thing. A lot of stuff I see on social media annoys the hell out of me. But an absolutely brilliant, you know, especially for independent artists and independent labels, that's a really brilliant promo tool. For example, an artist she's an American artist but lives over here, Acantha Lang. She's originally from New Orleans, amazing sort of bluesy funk soul singer. She's been over here a good few years, and she's just working her own release completely as an independent artist. But she picked my brain about a few things, how to do things, and she just does it all herself.
Yeah, yeah.
And is a genius at it, and got a TV advert by putting one of her clips in the early lockdown. She was just doing acoustic things with her partner playing a guitar behind her. Beautiful voice. She put this little clip of her doing a cover version of "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free."
Yeah, yeah.
Puts it on all her platforms, and someone in Poland says, "We love that. We want to use it on this huge advert. Here's loads of money." Well, here's quite a lot of money, and that's how an independent artist using all social media can actually, just on literally by a slightly fluky kind of thing, but she just pumps it, builds her audience, puts great content out there, and wham, suddenly she's got a TV advert synchronization deal that's then gone on to help her fund her new album,
That is, that's awesome. Yeah, there's a young lady that we work with out of the Philippines that had the same thing happen with Samsung, and that actually led to a duet with Jason Mraz, which 40 million views later, she's doing all right. So yeah,
exactly,
it can happen. But it's definitely challenging in this day and age. I work a lot with artists that have been established, and trying to find revenue channels are always in pursuit of other revenue channels. Are you finding, I know somebody like Brian, and Brian lives here in Southern California, and you're in the UK. I didn't clear that up, but I think people picked that up as the interview went along. He tours a lot, and he's, his son, and and it's part of this whole scene that we work with here. How does that translate over there with an artist that you have here? Do you feel that you're fostering his brand more internationally, or are you finding that Brian still his the projects that you're putting out, is it resonating more in the European, UK markets?
If we're talking about specifically with the Brian Auger stuff, just all we've put out so far, we're still at the absolute early stage of this whole thing. We've actually officially released is a 26-track digital compilation that goes from 1961 up until about 2009, or a bit later in terms of his career, and it includes 6 or 7 things that were either only previously ever bootlegged in the old days, and some rare things. But we found some absolute gems that even I was looking through this list and files that Karma sent me, and I saw a track, Janine, and I thought, I've never heard a Brian Auger version of G. I know his records backwards. Yeah. And looked at it, and it's Brian Auger, Julie Driscoll, and the Trinity. And it must have been a demo. It was just put away. It was recorded. It's this beautiful, sweet little short that just run through that jazz classic. And I asked Brian about it, and he was like, don't remember that. But there it was, buried on a hard drive. So I led with that as the kind of instant grat single, because it's just like I say, this compilation is just digital. And my PR people gets it to Giles Peterson, the UK, on BBC. He's got his own radio station and on BBC Six Music, and he's just freaking out about this. There's a version of Janine where over here, that's a particularly strong Janine in all the jazz dance clubs. Yeah. That's still a strong song. And to have a new version of it from the 60s by someone like Brian Auger, Giles Peterson lost his mind a little bit and just, and didn't just play the track, he was ranting about it. And, but with Brian's stuff, there's essentially been both the PRs I've had working on this have just come back and say there's so much love for him out there. It's ridiculous. And it comes often from places where you don't expect it. All kinds of people are Brian Auger fans. I bumped into Emma Jean Thackeray at the Jazz FM Awards before Christmas, she's a woman, up-and-coming, award-winning jazz producer, trumpeter over here, who I wouldn't expect her to even her parents wouldn't know who Brian Auger was. But she heard this conversation I was having with someone about him and just stuck her nose in and went, "Are we talking about Brian Auger?" And I went, "Yeah." And she went, "I love Brian." And I was just like, "Can I use that as a quote?" And she's like, "Absolutely, anything you want." That kind of thing. And we've just had love from everywhere, all kinds of people. There's been lots of magazine, articles about the catalogue coming. And the things that are in it. But do you want to hear a really beautiful story?
Yes, please,
The Guardian over here The Guardian, big newspaper, and online, they did a big interview with Brian. And the day it went live on their website, we were all throwing it around the internet. It was a really good piece, covered a lot of ground. We were throwing it around the internet like crazy, like a good record label does. Going, look at this, and the numbers were going up. But that day, late for Brian, obviously Brian's on your
on our time
side of the country. But he rings me. Yeah, he rings me, and it's late. But he just said, I just had to ring you up. And I said, what happened? He goes, well, he goes, it's that, because we worked out as the Guardian piece. Basically, Brian's phone rung and from a number he didn't recognize, and he answered it, and this voice said to him, "Is that you, beautiful Brian? Lovely boy." And Brian's like, "Yeah, who's that?" And he said, "It's Elton."
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to say, he goes, basically, Elton had done he'd read the article online and suddenly went, "Oh, I loved Brian Auger." And, their paths hadn't crossed in years, although in Elton's autobiography, he does mention about, there was some band, I forget, it was something to do with Rod Stewart, where Brian had sat in on the keyboards or Elton was taking over that role, and he was like absolutely terrified because he said, Brian was a musician's musician, and Elton John at the time didn't feel like he was. This is in about 1966, but Elton went to great trouble. He started ringing people and said, who do you know who's? He looked up or got someone to look up, and contacted an old live agent of Brian's that Brian had only used a couple of times. And then, here's his number. So cool. So he just felt he just had to ring him up, and obviously, and Brian was pretty blown away by that, because, like I say, it was just like, he's going, "I always thought you were the best out of all those Hammond guys. You were terrifying," and all this.
Well, I guess they always called him the jazzer, so it wasn't about jazz, and it's about the blues, so that just kind of worked out.
But like I say, going back to your question, like I say, we're at the early days yet, but essentially from the sort of summer onwards, and for the next 18 months, 2 years, or depends how I work it. But I've got some amazing, packages of, reissue and previously unreleased Brian Auger stuff from right across his career. We're going hell for leather, because especially in terms of the vinyl, most of his albums haven't been reissued on vinyl properly or ever since they came out in the 60s and 70s, because there was an issue with, But so we're now doing, the first thing is coming sort of late summer. At the moment, it's all just lining up. It's a beautiful repackaged. This will be CD and vinyl. Brian Auger and the Julie Driscoll, all the studio albums in a beautiful box set with a 12-page booklet with an interview that Brian's just done with Lois Wilson from Mojo magazine. Then there'll be a similar project for Brian Auger's Oblivion Express, all the 6 studio albums, those were all completely remastered from the original tapes. And we also found on the tapes, on the 2-inch tapes, that there's alternate versions. Brian did 1, 2, or 3 alternate takes of everything, cool, all those across all those albums.
I was going to say, it's cool that he owns the rights to his masters, it seems. So, and then now you guys are
Brian was. Yeah, there's been a couple of labels over the past who've, legitimately, or even if they thought they were legitimately putting some stuff out, but they haven't. Yeah. But this is the first time, like I say, no one's really gone hell for leather on the physical. Because like I say, most of those Oblivion Express albums have never been reissued. Like I say, we've got completely remastered. All the artwork has been not just scanned from original sleeves, but digitally rebuilt using original sleeves and digital files. All the text and the fonts has all been replaced to make it extra sharp and not just look, so it doesn't look like a reproduction. We're going hell for leather on that, because that's what you do. But like I say, going back to your question, he's getting love from everywhere at the moment, and it's just lovely to see. And it seems cross-generational and international.
It is. His sound to me is kind of like Betty Davis. The first time I heard Betty Davis recently, I mean, I remember it from back in the day, but you kind of, artists fade and you don't really hear from them. I was on Spotify and on a funk, listening to a funk playlist, and Betty Davis came on. I'm like, who's this new artist? And it was Miles Davis's former wife, and she did a funk thing with Hancock. and Alphonse Mizone, and they were killing it, and it sounded, you know, and to me it was cross generational because it was mixed in with a bunch of new funk players like Corey Henry and all these other cats. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, you know. Yeah. And I didn't know. I looked at who it was, and I liked, you know, Betty Davis. I know that name, and then you start looking up all the history. I'm like, wow, it's been so long. And then so I'm looking forward to the stuff with Brian and all the new stuff that you guys.
There's going to be so much, so much. But so what else do you need to know? I've got.
Well, so
what do you need to know?
You've got other artists, right? That you're going to be working with.
I just quite varied. I mean, the label's called Soul Bank, but that's a very. I see it as a kind of slightly all-encompassing generic title. Yeah. The first album we put out was by Australian vocalist Kylie Aldist, and that looks and sounds, that entire album, the concept, and it was meant to be, looks like it was recorded and released in about 1983, 84, because it's a really good modern take on that kind of late disco, electro boogie, everything from Shaka Khan to, you know, really kind of, it was, you know, it's good like time party music, but it's.
Now? Is it kind of like the Dua Lipa now?
I'd say, naturally, I'm going to say it's a lot better. Because, I mean, Kylie Aldis is a long-established singer. You know, she's you know, in Australia and in Europe, she's been going for 25, 30 years. She's also ended up, long story short, the voice on an old Freestyle record that got remixed, put out by a major label. And she was the voice on this international hit that 2016 went number one in 9 or 10 countries, and, you know, was one of the hit 1 billion streams before any other track had, and all this kind of thing. Wow. So but her album on my label Soul Bank, it was called This Is What Happiness Looks Like, Dayglow pink and yellow, 80s lettering style, but it's really kind of like all that kind of underground. It kind of it was trying to sum up a bit of Chic, Nile Rodgers, the early 80s, Studio 54, but all those sort of soul and disco divas, all the kind of hip ones, not the cheesy stuff. Then another really fascinating album I urge anyone to check out, and I'd be saying that even if I hadn't have signed it and released it, is Tamil Rojon's Son of Nick's album. Now this one, completely opposite end of the spectrum. This Tamil Rojon is another Australian artist, a violin and viola player, a string arranger, conductor, mad jazz head, and he did a project that sounds like, and he did this modal jazz fusion, spiritual jazz project with him playing viola that sounds like those guys, well, you know, Jean-Luc Ponty, there was a guy called Michael White, jazz string players, but he's playing a viola, which is lower pitched than the violin, and it's much mellower. But he did this crazy, spacey 70s sort of spacey jazz. It's got loads of wordless choirs and original analog synths, but with loads of, I don't know, it sounds like Herbie Hancock, but with a viola player. Imagine the Headhunters with a viola player.
Okay.
And that got a lot of people's attention. It sounds crazy on paper, but there was something, it's all very arranged. There's structures to the music because he's got classical background. And it's absolutely one of those jazz albums, like So What?
Yeah.
Is that people who don't like jazz love it. People are still discovering, it came out, over a year ago, and people are still, websites and radio stations are still discovering it now and going, this is something completely different. You kind of know where it is. It's very accessible. It's not screeching and wailing. It's very melodic very, approached from a classical musician's point of view. And I urge you to check it out because people who even people who hate jazz like it.
I'm going to have people who are watching right now, if they scroll down a little bit, we're going to have a lot of the links here to all these different projects because, our audience is worldwide, but, we're here in the U.S. and we predominantly have a U.S. audience. And, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is there's so much music. Discovery of music is a lot more complicated. I really miss the days of just going to the radio stations that were a little bit more cutting edge and hearing the new stuff that they put out, because it's almost like if you don't know, then you don't know. That's a TikTok meme that goes around, but it's true. If you don't know, you don't know unless you're, it's hard. I'm in my 50s and I really like to try to keep up with what's going on with the with music of today, and to the kids, and then they're the adults that are in their early 20s. And I used to be able to do that a lot easier. Can't do that anymore. So hopefully this will provide a lot of insight to your music and the stuff that's going on over there, because I find that even though that there's a love of this music that we've all been building together, pop music and funk and soul and of course jazz, I think that we don't quite get the stuff that you guys do over there. So thanks for bringing that here, and hopefully people through the show will be able to see a little bit more of that. Sorry, I'm going on a tirade because I really want people to
tirade away. I do that all the time. Yeah.
to be able
I was just doing one.
Cool music. No, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's kind of move on a little bit, because this is all encompassing of what's going on in this music business now. What's your thoughts on the music business? You were alluding to it earlier before, where even in 2015, you were still selling a lot more physical product, but you're finding that you're doing a lot more marketing. Do you feel that artist development is something that is an important part of the label process now? Do you find yourself getting into other areas, like you mentioned, seek licensing and other things? What's the state of the business, and how do you approach it?
Well, first of all, I mean, like I say, once again, just a disclaimer that coming from, especially now, like a brand new label that's less than 2 years old, but obviously I've got some established names on it. Craig Charles in Europe, in these 2 compilations, because he is he's been on Six Music doing funk and soul for 20 years. He's a TV actor. He's even got a game show now. He's that mainstream in the UK. So we can, but we can still, especially for his audience, still sell, solid numbers of CDs and the vinyl.
Okay.
Certain releases generally these days, you might find that the vinyl sells more than the CD, but, and sort of, industry things I've seen even for North America, seem that the CDs kind of are having the longest death. But for certain releases, certain markets, they're perfectly viable and profitable and good, and you can still, shift lots of numbers. But in terms of, like I said before, you have to really be on everything. You have to, things that are going to pop up now, in the future, it will be NFTs for music. Well, they're already popping up now, and it's already becoming an issue within the industry. When 18 months ago, I didn't know what an NFT was, but actually I'm going to drop his name now. I've got an LA-based artist also signed to Soul Bank for a couple of projects. Mark DeClive Lowe, the keyboardist, DJ, producer, remixer, NFT artist. He's completely into Web3. He's very tech focused, and it was him who got me up to speed on NFTs, because when he first mentioned it, I didn't have a clue what I was talking about. He's got a brilliant live jazz album coming out in a couple of months on my label called Freedom. It's live. It was recorded at was it the Blue Oyster or the Blue Whale? The Blue Whale, is it?
Blue Whale, yeah.
That's, with Dwight Tribble on vocals.
It's not a wet round.
They're doing
anymore, but unfortunately.
Oh, right. That is a shame. But the album is a live album with a crack team of players, including Dwight Tribble doing the vocal duties. Wow. You see that? That's going to be I've got a gatefold double LP for that one in a beautiful, with Mark Clive Lowe he's half Japanese. So he has a Japanese artist who's done this beautiful, fantastic commissioned painting for the sleeve. It's going to look great on an LP. But anyway, moving on to NFTs are going to be increasingly a thing. Still don't know how they are going to pan out. And I'm not myself overly convinced yet. About NFTs, but that's just there'll be other emerging platforms, and emerging platforms always mean potential income streams hitting the music business as clever people come up with other clever ways to try and part you with your money.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. Yeah,
but like I say, in terms of what you do with a label, you really these days you've got to be on everything. So even when you got to be looking always be on all platforms. And in terms of your catalog and all the creative rights that you represent or own, for the artist's sake and yours, you've got to at least try and get it out there. And like I say, if it comes to NFTs, perhaps we'll do some of those as well.
Yeah, right. You have to. It's like
you've got to be in it to win it, essentially. Yeah.
You've got to do all different things here. So as we kind of cap off this, I got to have you back again because there's so many things to cover here, and we'll I think the next time we talk, we'll tackle specifically. We'll just go on subjects and just kind of go on our tirades, rants, and our praises about specific subject. Where this one's, we're just getting caught up and over talk to each other and so long, and I don't know why. Because the original conversations were great, and I was helping Brian with a couple of the tours, helping one of his promoters is a good friend of mine, Lori Reimer. She's been helped. She helps all the a lot of the classic rock artists. Although Brian's not really a classic rock artist, but because he was aligned with all those folks,
he really was. So that's the weird thing. The Brian Auger fans turn up in the strangest places. We're also, because we've now got the individual track parts for all the Oblivion Express studio albums. Yeah. I'm there. I am asking, and people are up for very tasteful, suitable remixers and producers like Mark de Clive Lowe. He's itching to dive into that. So we're going to be doing a lot of stuff of that. We're even looking at obviously immersive audio special editions of one or two of his albums, Dolby Atmos, Sony 360, all that kind of thing, because there's another thing. Obviously, Brian's son Karma does that for a living, but so that's easy peasy for me to say, all right, let's do one of the classic studio albums in Sony 360.
You've always done
that. And like I say, so remixes as well, and we certainly hope, Brian, via the K7 arrangement with Soul Bank Music and with Brian Auger, if anybody wants to license one of Brian's tracks or sample it or whatever we want to do, they come through us. And that's especially with a catalogue that goes as wide as Brian's and with some what you call, what's the term they use, key copyrights within like This Wheel's on Fire or Flesh Failures from Hair, his version of that. I don't see why that couldn't be on some big corporate's massive worldwide TV advert and make everybody lots of money, especially Brian. So sure. That's what we're thinking of. That's how you approach it.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question I wanted to go back to, and now I just lost my train of thought. It's worse when you're...
That's because I was on another tirade. I put you off your thought.
I do know. So how involved do you guys get into touring? And I'm sorry, I had that, and I was like, I started going on all this cool Brian stuff. So how involved do you get into touring now? That was a big thing back in the days of the early days of music, where touring and record releases are, they were synonymous. Do you find that that's still a big thing with what you guys are doing?
It absolutely helps. Obviously, the last couple of years, for a lot of it got wiped out. But essentially, for small to medium-sized labels, they do it in different ways. But you always just try and coordinate live activity. Even if the label doesn't have any direct financial interest in the artist's live revenue, just for common sense, you try and coordinate your live activity around key points in your release schedule and all that kind of thing. And that seems to be a symbiotic, ongoing thing, no matter what the actual contractual arrangements, because it just makes common sense. It over here now, just to give you the update, it's still tricky. COVID was one thing, but also Britain leaving the EU in terms of the practicalities of. It's now a massive nightmare. I've got artist friends of mine, agents just saying the stuff they've got to do now. Omar, my friend Lucia manages Omar, who I work with on Freestyle Records and watch this space regarding soul bank music, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. She was just walking me through the other day all what she has to do now to put on one gig to get him and a band over to the continent, over to France.
Yeah.
You know, or wherever, with all the extra forms because of COVID, and also because Britain's now outside the EU. So we're now treated in that regard as there's just paperwork, and then there's all the COVID paperwork on top, and you've got. So it's been tricky. But in terms of how you try and support, I've only gigged myself a couple of times in lockdown with my own band, and that was just in London, so I didn't have anything much to worry about apart from moving that thing behind me, the Hammond, which is very heavy.
Well, hey, brother, Greg, I really appreciate your time here with us. We got to bring you back on again. We got more to cover, and like I said, maybe we'll do like a semi-regular thing where we break down topics.
Hey, I'll be up for that. Yeah. I just got to make sure I get all you guys up to date on all the releases, the ones that are out and the ones that are coming, because I think you can pick through that, and I think you'll find some stuff you'll quite like.
Thank you, brother. I thank everyone for tuning in, and stay tuned for another episode of The Changing Stage.